Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashyakritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaye Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We saw yesterday that with verse 31, the entire prakriya for understanding the nature of self, nature of Brahman is complete, including the Alastuti. That prakarana, starting with the first verse, it talks about Dṛg-dṛśya, took us through the whole process and showed how one can gain this knowledge by removing the avarana and the projection made by Maya. Now, if you look at the style of that section, it is very analytical in nature. There is a lot of debate that goes on about who actually wrote this Prakarana Grantha. Some people attributed to Shankaracharya, some people attributed to Vidyaranya Muni, some people attributed to Bharati Tirtha. But the way this is structured, it appears as if a different person has written this section. There are two commentaries written on this text, but they don't mention this about the authorship. So the debate rages on. Swamiji's assessment is that the first part, up to verse 31, is by Vidyaranya Muni, who has written the other text called Panchadashi, probably the foremost Prakarana Grantha. In fact, there are many verses in this which are taken straight from a Upanishad called Saraswati Rahasya Upanishad. And we saw the last verse 32 is taken directly from Mundaka Upanishad. That is quite the style of Vidyaranya Muni. He takes these and analyzes them threadbare. It's quite possible that this bit is by Vidyaranya. But Bharati Tirtha has also written some additions to Panchadashi. It's quite possible that the second section, which is actually another Prakarana, not even Dṛg-dṛśya-viveka Prakarana, has been written by Bharati Tirtha. We don't know. Be that as it may, this is also a wonderful Prakarana, but really speaking, I don't even know if it makes sense to add it to this whole text. Maybe we should consider this text as two different texts. But it has been handed down to us as one text. So we take it as one text, but we must understand that I've got all that. So far, I've understood that. Here's another way of looking at the truth. This second prakarana addresses issues of what is a jiva. Now, we have many experiences in life. When we interact with the world, we find many, many things happening, some of which are individual person's projections, some of which are as handed down to us empirically. Most people look at these two and stop there. It's only when you start questioning, then you start trying to figure out even this, the empirical assessment, which is different from my personal projection, which is different for different people, which is different for the same person at different times. It is also a truth. It is not untruth. But for the person at that time, it is the truth. But he may change his mind. The idea of truth itself might change when additional inputs come in and the mind tends to analyze what it sees, what it perceives through all the senses, and change its conclusion. We took the example of gold ornaments. When the person buying the gold ornament looks at it and makes one's own projection. This is beautiful, very subjective. The person who's come shopping along with this person may have a different perception, may have a different projection. No, this is not so nice. This one is much better. It's a subjective projection. The same person might take that gold chain in sunlight, because these shops are very well brightly Jagat-jyoti lit, but it's artificial light. He might want to take it in natural light and say, no, this is not quite what I thought it was. No jeweler will allow you to take it outside. But let us say in the case of a fabric you're buying, then that projection that one made changes because of additional input. In that gold shop, everything is just gold. Is another perspective. That is the nature of it, nature of gold. Gold is malleable. Gold can be made shiny. Gold has certain atomic weight. Gold has certain properties. All of them are empirically true. You have one set of projected vision of the gold ornaments, which varies from person to person, which of course marketing people take full advantage of. These days, when you want to buy color, paint for your room, they will give you any shade of color you want. Earlier, they used to have these little pieces of paper with different shades of, let's say you want blue, so many shades of blue they'll give you. Now they give you infinite shades of blue. Mera wala blue. That mera wala blue is that person's mera wala blue. They may not appeal to another person. And then they have computer generated mixing. They have only white paint and then they'll put the color in that to give you a particular shade of blue and mix it thoroughly. And you get mera wala blue. Finally, of course, when you paint it in the room, this is not quite what I had in mind. That's different. That your perception changes. We have these things happening all the time. Because we have a projection, which is subjective projection, called pratibhasikam. Where is this projection taking place? There is something on which this is taking place. There is an Ishvara Shrishta Jagat. That Jagat that we call Vyavaharika. Vyavaharika literally we translate as transactional. When one wants to sell that gold chain one has bought, if you want to sell it back to the jeweler, he will only take the weight of gold. Now, on that weight of gold, when you bought it, you added, or he added certain value for your person because you liked it very much. So if the value of the gold on that is 1.5 lakh, he might add another lot, 20,000 rupees, because you liked it in that form. So when you want to take it back to the shop, that pratibhasika projection that you made, which added some apparent value to this, is nowhere to be found. He will only take it, put it on a scale, and measure the weight of the gold. And say the weight of the gold is so many grams. Therefore, this is let us assume the price of gold has not changed. So the same 1.5 lakhs worth of gold will be 1.5 lakhs. That is Vyavaharika. It is only gold. Whatever else the person who bought it originally saw in that is only a subjective projection, only pratibhasikam, and has no value now. However, if instead of selling it to the jeweler back, who only sees the gold in that, only does Vyavahara, empirical value of that gold, if you sell it to your cousin, who also likes that chain, who also likes the workmanship in the chain, who also likes the form the chain is now, he may be willing to give you a little more added value. That is his pratibhasikam or her pratibhasikam. But the inherent value, what is often referred as empirical perspective, is only the value of gold. That is called Vyavaharika Srishti, Vyavaharika point of view. Vyavaharika, like I said, Ishvara Srishtam. Everything here is Ishvara Srishtam. Within that Ishvara Srishti is only the Pratibhasika. It is not as if it is a separate perspective, separate reality. It is only the same reality. The Vyavaharika reality, which is Ishvara Srishtam, in which you see these variations. Pratibhasika. But if you were to see it from one other perspective, whether it is gold or copper or tungsten, it becomes non-separate from its own karanam. Like all the gold jewelry, when non-separate from the karanam, which is gold, the gold and the copper and the platinum and whatever else are also non-separate from their cause, because there is a cause. That karanam, looked at it from that perspective, all these become of no value at all. Whether it is made of brass or copper or gold, is the same. You saw in the Bhagavad Gita also, whether it is gold or a clod of earth, if you look at it from that perspective, the same value. Whereas looked at from the perspective of gold, which is the karanam for all of these things, they are the same, non-separate from gold. And that gold and all the other possible elements are non-separate from their karanam, which is one uncaused cause. You had a variety, apparent variety, in which you had Pratibhasika Satyam. All of them resolved into Vyavaharika Satyam. And then you had a variety of Vyavaharika Satyam, and all of them resolved into the Paramarthika Satyam. So this section takes this sort of an idea and looks at the jiva. We concluded in the last section that the jiva is non-separate from Brahman, which is really the Paramarthika view. But doubts may linger. Doubt will linger. Why me? This jiva, which I recognize, one jiva, another jiva, another jiva, another jiva, another jiva, that's how I recognize it. Each one with its own limitation. Each one with its own set of problems. Each one with its own set of sukha and dukkha. Sukha and dukkha. different from each other. How can I equate them to that one indivisible, uncaused cause? On the surface of it, they look very different. This different perception of difference is also important. Without this perception of difference, there is no teaching. That perception is common experience. Because we stop short at pratibhasika perspective, that reality. At best, we elevate it to resolve that into vyavaharika reality, empirical reality. But to raise it, to resolve it into paramarthika perspective, paramarthika reality, of which there is only one. There are no multiples. And because there are no multiples, there is no another cause for saying I recognize all these as one. Ekameva advitiya satyam. That which cannot be broken down into many. The breaking down into many happens only when you look at the vyavaharika perspective. The vyavaharika reality is multiple, which then gets multiplied further when you look at the pratibhasika reality. That's how you get infinite varieties in this Jagat. This wall paint color is a wonderful example. There was probably a time when you said, I want blue, that's it. Then we came up with this idea, Asian paints and Berger paints and everybody else came with these color charts. This blue or this blue? And then that also broke up into infinite varieties of blue. So using that kind of prakriya, the author takes up the idea of a jiva. What is a jiva? We, in thinking of jiva, think of a sentient, intelligent, thinking being. That's how we see jiva. Where does this capacity to think, the capacity to know, where does that come from? Where is it in the system? There is the sharira, the sthula sharira, which I know very well to be jada. I know the physical sharira is incapable of thinking or doing. Then we say maybe it is because it is supported by the mind, the antakaranani, which have a capacity to think. Well, if we examine that also, the buddhi is part of the sthula sharira. The manas is part, although they are called sukshma sharira, they are also jada. the capacity to think, which we attribute to the mind. That mind is also jada. Senses are jada. All these we saw have their existence because of their karana, because they're all part of the vyavaharika satyam. And if we examine this again, like in the light of this, you will see that all of these are jada and do not have an individual capacity to know, to think on their own. Just like physically we resolve everything into its karanam, the sukshma also resolves into its own karanam. None of these have this capacity. It's called chaitanya, chetana. In Hindi you say chetana for a living thing, and achetana, Sanskrit also uses the same words. They are achetana, and yet they have chetana capacity. Where does that come from? Similarly, whether you talk of the sthula sharira or the sukshma sharira, they are all subject to limitations. They are different from each other. My sthula sharira and my sukshma sharira are not the same as your sthula sharira and your sukshma sharira. That's how we experience it. Each one is limited in a different way. They are differentiated in the sthula sharira by being fat or thin, tall or short, dark or fair. In terms of sthula sharira, as a sharp thinker or a dull thinker, as an emotional person or a non-emotional person, as a logical person or a person who is driven by subjective assessments. Varieties of them. They also resolve into their own cause. The jiva that we know, in what form do we know the jiva? We know it to be individual. We know it to be sentient and alive. How does that form take place? So with this background, if we examine the verses in this section, we will see how the author, whoever it is, maybe Bharati Tirtha, maybe anybody else, analyzes this. What is the nature of this jiva? If that Sakshi is Brahman, then the jiva cannot be Brahman. They're very different, apparently. Like I said, in all ways, They're different. And Brahman if he is separate from Jiva, where is the teaching? What are we trying to learn? I know it's different. If there is an idea called Brahman, that's not I. If you define Brahman as Anantam, that's not I. Then what am I trying to learn? What is Shastra trying to teach us? So he takes up this concept of Jiva and shows us how we can analyze it. Let's read this first verse, verse 32. Avachinnachidaabhasah
Avachinnachidaabhasah
Tritiya swapna kalpitah
Tritiya kalpitah
Vigneyas trividho jivah Tatrāgyya paramartikah.
Tatrāgyya paramartikah.
He divides the jiva, the perspective of the jiva, in three ways, threefold. One he calls avachinna, other he calls chidabhasa, and tritiyaha swapna kalpitaha. Vigyeyaha trividho jivaha. Threefold views on what is a jiva have to be known. The jiva has to be known in the threefold ways. One as avachinna, other as chidabhasa, and tritiya swapna kalpitaha. Swapna kalpita. Kalpita means imagine. Like in a swapna. Projected. Imagined nature of the jiva. If you look at the individual in the swapna, it's a projection of the dreamer, and it's a very individual projection. Other than the dreamer, there's no other projection. That